Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today as we delve into the role of staff training in meeting the Care Quality Commission's well-led criteria. Um, as we know, this criteria has been put into effect with the aim of raising standards and improving patient safety. But to make it a reality, everyone involved needs to be on board. That's everyone across the whole staffing spectrum. So as a result, high quality staff training, clear governance structures, and an open and communicative culture are vital. If we could just skip to the next page quickly and get my mug out of the way. So my name is Glenn Ferris. I'm the editor-in-chief, now managing director of Healthcare Today, and I'm joined by Dion Simon, who's the head of medical operations at Designated Medicals. As mentioned today, we'll guide you we'll guide you through what the CQC expects under the well-led domain. We'll discuss how training directly influences inspection outcomes and talk about how to build a confident, competent, and compliant workforce. Sorry. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation, so please put any queries you have into the chat box as we go along. We will aim to answer those questions at the end. But in the meantime, let me pass you over to Dion to take it from here.
Good afternoon, everybody. So in today's session, we'll be breaking down what the CQC expects under the well-led domain, and how staff training influences inspection outcomes. We'll also explore some practical ways that leaders and business owners can build a capable and confident and compliant workplace. So if we go to the next slide, why well-led matters. So it sounds quite obvious, but well-led is actually the core driver of the CQC safety section. So it drives clinical effectiveness, patient experience, and they make it a central focus for their inspectors. So strong leadership and culture apply across NHS and private healthcare providers, and training acts as your foundation of that. So it's extremely important, especially when it comes to inspections. What the CQC means by well led. The CQC looks for vision, values, strategic direction, and this all needs to be supported by the leaders in the business, who should be visible, accountable, and inclusive. So they would expect a culture where staff feel safe, supported, well trained, and obviously are encouraged to raise concerns. And this is really what well led encompasses. Training turns your organizational values into real consistent behaviors across your entire team, and it supports effective delegation and governance. It boosts the leadership capabilities, it strengthens incident reporting and learning, and the CQC will see this as high quality care in a safe and well-led environment. Inspectors want to see, well, when I say what they want to see, that can be vague. From different inspectors will expect to see different things, but what they do generally want is up-to-date, role-specific training. So a structured induction, evidence of any learning and how it's effectively supervised. They'll look for proof of that training, and also they want to see outcomes. So how are you showing that the training is improving your service, not just attendance? And I think this is where many providers go wrong. You'll have a checklist of training facilities or places that you would use, and you'll go through all of the standard health and safety and clinical governance, but actually it's quite important that you choose your training schedule or your training program, and it fits with what you're actually delivering, and you're showing how it's improving your service. Many organizations fall into the tick box compliance grey area, where you have your training, like I've just mentioned, it exists, but it's very much an exercise that people will rush through, and it's just there to show the inspector that you've actually done the training. So this makes you look weak. So inspectors won't like this. They'll want more information on the leadership side. How are leaders ensuring that people are actually taking in what they're learning? Yeah, you may have a certificate at the end of each training session that you do, but is there any feedback on that? Do you involve these in your one-to-ones with your team? Look for places where you can highlight that discussions have happened, learning is being objectively kind of looked at and assessed by your leaders, by your managers. Achieving an outstanding grade is obviously what everybody wants to achieve, and it actually can be really difficult. Um, Outstanding providers go beyond the standard requirements. So they're always demonstrating really strong governance, clear values, proactive leadership. They protect patient information. They listen to feedback. Feedback's really important. And actually, what are they then implementing that changes the service in line with that feedback? If you can embed these types of things into the way that your practice is run every day, then actually achieving an outstanding grade won't be that difficult. So, creating a learning organization. A learning organization prioritizes safety so that staff feel able to speak up. That's really, really important. You need to create an environment where it's about learning and focusing on improving rather than actually blaming. Inspectors look upon sort of blaming and that kind of toxic culture very negatively. So it's really, really important that in all of your documentation and all of your feedback that you keep for the inspectors, you're highlighting that this isn't about blame, it's about focus and learning. So, practical actions for providers. Being a well led service means that you have to anticipate resistance from your team. You need to know how you're going to effectively combat that in a positive way. Strengthening your inductions, making it consistent. That's where a lot of people fall down. Consistency really is key. You have to be having the same inductions across all of your team. They should all be really, really strong. And it shouldn't be that somebody's seen as having maybe less of an induction or less training because their role is, different to that of a practice manager, for example. So everything should be consistent. And the mapping of training should really be linked to the CQC themes. So key lines of inquiries, and anything else that's relating to the CQC inspection. Okay, so summary and key takeaways. High quality training, obviously one. Strong governance, culture rooted in safety and accountability. These are all essential. And when organizations prioritize these as their foundations, both staff and patients experience a safer and more consistent care. And that needs to be your focus. Safe, consistent care leads to well led.
Dion, thank you very much. That was fantastic. As I said, mentioned at the start, if you have any questions, please do pop them in the chat. But I've got questions of my own. I always have questions of my own. I mean, from a top level, I mean, beyond basic compliance, what does the CQC mean by a high quality service in the well-led domain? I guess particularly regarding leadership, culture, governance, etc.
Yeah, I mean, and this is the problem, and we find this comes up so many times with clients that we look after. So the CQC will send you an inspector, and each inspector will have their own experience. They therefore will have a different view on what all of these things mean. So what you have to try and achieve is focusing on the key aspects like strong governance, really good training, and making it personal to your service. I think if you can focus on making it linked to your service, then actually at a higher level, it ends up becoming something that would tick a box in well led anyway, because
Hmm.
you go above and beyond what's expected in as standard governance or standard training. So I think the key is really mapping every single thing that you do to your service. And eventually that should push you into a well led kind of area. Does
So
that
by
answer
making
the
it,
question?
I believe it does. And so essentially making it a culture issue as much as a compliance issue,
A
you'll get
hundred
that.
percent. And the
Okay.
staff, I think staff are key because you can have a really well-led team. Your manager could be amazing, all of the training could be perfect. But if your team don't feel engaged with what they're doing and don't understand the expectations on them, especially during an inspection, then you could fall short. So again, it's prepping them, engaging them, making sure that they are aware of where all of the CQC policies are. You know, if they don't know how to answer a question, that's okay, but how would they go about finding the answer? And that's where it comes into being well led. If a member of staff said, I don't actually know the answer to that question to an inspector. However, I know that we've got a CQC folder. I could find the answering there, or I would speak to my practice manager or the clinical lead. Then actually, you've already demonstrated that your management is well led. If they were to turn around and say, oh, I don't know the answer and I'm not sure how I'd find out, that obviously doesn't look good. So it's really key to have your people be completely on board with your culture.
I mean, you touched upon this in the creating a learning organization slide, but how can training programs be used to actively foster open, transparent, just culture where staff, I think the main thing is making staff feel safe to be able to speak up.
Yeah, and again, this comes down to, I think, daily communication, making sure that your staff are engaged with you as a practice manager or clinical lead. Do you have regular sessions with them? Do you have a good relationship with them? Do they feel that they can come to you with any problems? And if the answer to any of those is no, then you need to be implementing those things. So regular catch-ups with your team, one-to-ones, team meetings, and it doesn't always have to be based around work. You can have informal catch ups, you can have formal catch ups. This creates open communication. Then you need to be thinking about, well, if there was an issue, and let's say perhaps the issue is regarding something you've done as a clinician, are you responding to them in a calm manner? Are you responding in an emotional manner? Because they're not going to come to you if they think that they're going to get shouted at because they're giving you some feedback or information that you don't like. So it's really important to foster a really good relationship with your staff to achieve that.
Mhm. Um, in larger organizations, there's a lot of people don't necessarily know who is doing what. In smaller organizations, there's a bandwidth issue quite often, but who at the leadership level is ultimately accountable for ensuring that this training strategy is effective and
So,
importantly funded?
so technically, so there's two answers to this question. The technical answer is the CQC would see it as the registered manager is responsible for achieving it and for ensuring it's happening. The nominated individual on the license also has some responsibility to ensure that the registered manager is doing what they're supposed to. In a different type of organization where maybe it's larger and you have multiple managers, that's when it can be a bit of a gray area because different teams might have different managers and they might all report into the registered manager. So again, it's about making sure that your culture within your team, no matter how big and how small, fosters good communication and open communication lines. So even if you're a huge organization, the people that are doing the daily work should know if they have an issue, they can come to you by email, or maybe you have an option whereby if, again, in relation to whistleblowing, if somebody wants to give some information up, but they don't want you to know who they are and where it's come from, maybe you need to have some kind of email address or a box where they could fill in a form and complete it, and you're getting the feedback that you need without them having the blowback. So there's lots of different ways, and I think you really need to think about your organizational structure, the amount of people, and how that feeds down through into the teams that are ultimately responsible.
Mhm. Now, beyond professional development certificates, we all love them. But beyond that, what evidence might inspectors or CQC inspectors specifically look for to assess the quality and impact of staff training?
They'll interview staff members. So I would say that's your biggest takeaway. And this is why, again, it goes back to making sure they're completely engaged. You need to prep them for an inspection. They need to be aware of the types of questions that an inspector might ask, and they need to be comfortable with being able to answer those questions. So they're going to ask them about their training. They're going to ask them what key takeaways they got from it. They're going to ask them, have their manager been in touch with them since they've had the training? Has the training changed anything within your service or within your role? So they will ask these very telling questions, and the answers obviously will determine what they then take away. So if you want to be seen as well led, and that you're taking training really seriously, then you need to have regular catch ups with your team about their training. So one of the common things that we get, and I know this is from my time as a practice manager, is people would say, these training sessions are too long, I'm too busy, I don't have the time. And then what they might do is they might do it online, and they might just click through the answers because it's something that they do every year.
Hmm.
To me, that's not them really learning. They're not taking it in. And it's down to the practice managers or the managers within the hospitals, or whichever type of provider, to ensure that that's not happening. So even small questions like, can you give me three things that your training session today taught you? Or maybe you have a one-to-one with them on a quarterly basis. You could again ask them for facts and information from that training. If you don't think they're giving you good enough answers, then you then need to document that, and you need to put them through another training session. And actually, putting people through the same training session more than once shows the CQC that you are actually engaging. So the training doesn't have to be amazing, but at least you're showing accountability for what people are taking on board. And that's really important.
Absolutely. Do you have any insights on how the criteria help to empower staff in particular?
Um, I feel like, and this is just my opinion from my experience, but I feel like actually the culture that we keep mentioning,
Mm,
it needs to be about empowerment from the start. And if you're making your team feel like they're part of the inspection, they're part of the CQC. We all talk about how important it is, the ratings, we get the license, but if we make them feel like they're part of that, and empowering them always to be able to learn and to answer questions, and teaching them about accountability, by the time it gets to inspection time and things like that, they're actually going to be quite confident and quite
mm,
excited to show the inspectors what they've learned. And that's empowering them. So it's almost like empowering them from the beginning and all the way through
mm.
leads to a team member who really wants to show off their CQC knowledge and their ability.
Yeah.
I've seen people that have no experience, never been through an inspection before, and they've learned so much, and they're really proud of all the different training that they've undertaken throughout the year. And actually, that all ends in a really, really good result.
Mhm. Um, I'll fire one last question at you, and obviously give people opportunity to add any questions if they wish. But how should training address not just technical skills, but also values, behaviors, ethical decision making to build a fully compliant workforce that really understands the why behind the rules?
So I think you've actually touched on something that's really important, and I think this is where a lot of providers fall short. So, you've seen it. I worked in the NHS myself, so most people come from an NHS background that have worked in that working in the private sector or the independent sector,
Mhm.
and you'll have, I don't know, 30 different modules that you'll have to do, like manual handling and HOSH and health and safety and fire safety. And these are all really good practical things that obviously everybody needs to know. But where people fall short is they don't think about the values and the culture and the standards. And actually, there are many new providers who are providing training based on modules that are related to the key lines of inquiry. So you can find a provider who will be able to help you embed the cultural side and the value side just as much as the technical and the operational kind of frameworky stuff that's generic, that everyone needs that. But this is what I touched on it during the webinar, is that you have to be mapping these things to your service. So if you're somebody who's dealing with, let's say your age bracket for your patient base is pensioners, then you need to be putting people through some type of training on how to deal with people of a certain age, dementia, Alzheimer's, all of these types of things. And you can find courses based on these that are really great and really easy and also very cheap. And if you can do those alongside all of the other things, you're not only empowering your team and going to end up with a great result, but you're also showing the CQC that you are extremely well led. So it's a bit of everything, a bit of mapping your services and also communication on what your values are, because that's something you can also do throughout the year. That shouldn't just be a once a year training session. That should be something that's embedded in your operational framework, your monthly meetings, your quarterly meetings, your updates to your team, all of that stuff. It encompasses both.
Fantastic. Dion, thank you very much for your answers and your insights
You're
there.
very welcome.
We haven't had any questions sent over, which I can only assume that means that we covered it all in a good
Okay.
tight 23 minutes there. But obviously, if there are any questions, please do add it to the chat or do please follow up. You could also email info@designatedmedical.com or myself, glenn.ferris@healthcaretoday.com if you have any questions or outstanding queries. Otherwise, we Designated have another webinar lined up next week. God, you're packing them in on embracing technology and private practice in 2026. You can register the aforementioned info@designatedmedical.com. But aside from that, thank you very much for taking up some of your lunchtime. And oh, sorry, Melanie has just asked. We'll be handing out slides. We can absolutely share the deck. We will share a video with you, a recording of the webinar afterwards, which Designated will be sending. So hopefully that'll be of some use. But in the meantime, thank you very much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye bye.
Okay.